What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, August 8th, 2017. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. It's a very discouraging day so far. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick little program note. This coming Thursday, we finally inked this. Leon Siu, the foreign minister for the Kingdom of Hawaii, will be on our show in our third hour talking about, well, all kinds of things. It's been a while since we've had him on the show. He was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. He won the Sergio de Mello Peace Award down in Brazil. He's traveling the world representing the Kingdom of Hawaii and building support for a restoration of the kingdom's sovereignty, because, as you know, the U.S. government has officially acknowledged the annexation of Hawaii was illegal, and the people of Hawaii never surrendered their sovereignty. Now, the trick is to actually get it up and running again. And so we'll be talking with him on Thursday, and obviously, in light of the Calexit, the Brexit, Catalonia, and this growing nationalist surge around the world, there are more and more people here in this state who think that Hawaii needs to go back to being an independent republic, free of the mainland, United States, free of the federal government, free of all the tinkering and tampering, getting rid of the TSA so our tourism will come back. And so we'll be talking about that on Thursday. And, of course, on Friday, as always, the lovely Lady Claire will be in hour number 3. Now, today is the anniversary of the nuclear bombing of Nagasaki. And looking back on it, it was done, along with Hiroshima, just to prove the United States had these weapons and a government that was psychotic enough to use them. Because at the time these nuclear weapons were used, and keep in mind, for all this talk we're hearing about North Korea and their nukes and Iraq and their nukes and Iran and their nukes, it is the United States which remains the only country to have actually used nuclear weapons on the civilians of another country. But at the time of the dropping of the atomic bombs, Japan was already finished. They were ready to sue for peace when Russia came in officially into the war against Japan. That was basically it. They knew it was all over. And they were ready to sue. The only condition they wanted was the position of the emperor would be protected. Now, of course, the emperor was a figurehead anyway. The government was actually being run by Suzuki. And basically, when Suzuki came into office, he came in with the one single objective of ending the war. And the Japanese were trying to approach the Allies for peace through Switzerland and Moscow, peace on any terms at all, as long as the emperor was protected. And these are the terms the Japanese offered as early as January of 1945 and repeated through the USSR in July. Complete surrender of all Japanese forces and arms at home, on island possessions, and in occupied countries. Occupation of Japan and its possessions by Allied troops under American direction. Japanese relinquishment of all territory seized during the war, as well as Manchuria, Korea, and Taiwan. Regulation of Japanese industry to halt production of any weapons and other tools of war, release of all prisoners of war and internees, surrender of designated war criminals. And here's what's ironic. These are the exact same terms that the Americans accepted at the official Japanese surrender in September of 1945 down there on the decks of the USS Missouri. Truman dropped the nuclear weapons just to prove that we had them. So you think about that. Now we're going to take a phone call, then we're going to get into the really urgent news of the day. Kevin in West Virginia, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how are you today?
Well, hanging in there, all things considered.
All right. Well, I have recently learned that General McMaster's is the one that's colluding with George Soros, giving him intelligence briefings. Isn't that illegal?
Yes, it would be. And I saw that story over at InfoWars, and I'd like to see a little more backing for it. But if McMaster's is doing that, without the permission of Trump. Now, Trump may have said, I want you to keep Soros informed so we're not working at cross purposes. But if McMaster's is doing this without the permission of President Trump, then yeah, he should be fired for that, if not prosecuted.
Also, General Petraeus is also giving intelligence briefings to the Clintons on the restructuring of the White House.
Boy, oh boy, talk about, it really is a swamp over there, isn't it? And
yes, it is, and I didn't know if you were going to cover that later or not. But
well, if I have time, I'll get to it. Apparently, one of the stories floating around about the refurbishment of the White House is apparently the Secret Service and Trump's private security discovered it's loaded with cameras and microphones. So there was literally a spy system set up inside the White House, and they want to tear that all out of there. All right. Well, Kevin, thank you very much for the phone call. We'll try and fit that story into the program, but we got a lot of other stuff to get through, and we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Well, if you have been watching the corporate media at all for the last 3 hours, you will have seen by now this nonstop pound it, sell it, sell it, sell it story that North Korea is now making nuclear weapons that can fit on their missiles. And the story was broken by the Washington Compost based on a claimed analysis by the Defense Intelligence Agency. And they're out there saying, forget what the Russian Foreign Ministry said about them being years away. Oh, absolutely. They've got missile-ready warheads right now, and they've got lots of them. They've got 60 of them. It's, oh, my goodness. They have warheads and a whole bunch of them, just like Saddam Hussein had. Honest. And when you look at just how much pressure they're putting on this story, it does come across as a sales pitch rather than news reporting. They're just trying to hit that repetition over and over and over again. North Korea is a threat, North Korea is a threat, North Korea is a threat. Now, the original source for this report appears to be a 500-page report that came out of Japanese intelligence that basically said North Korea has reached a new stage and that North Korea's weapons programs had advanced considerably where it might be possible for North Korea to miniaturize nuclear warheads. And so here we have the report saying it might be possible. It's a far cry from saying they're doing it. And all of a sudden it's all over the American corporate media. Oh, North Korea has got missile-ready nukes. Missile-ready nukes. Missile-ready nukes. Oh, it's going to be horrible, horrible, horrible. So we're sitting here at the dawn of the 2017 remake of On the Beach. And again, the reason North Korea is developing nuclear missiles and nuclear weapons is so that they will be left alone. Look, over the last 16 years, the United States is consistent in invading and attacking countries that do not have a nuclear deterrent. The U.S. is staying away from countries that do, at least for the moment here. Now, apparently, U.S. spy satellites have detected North Korea moving anti-ship cruise missiles onto a patrol boat. And, of course, we've got Tillerson out there saying, they're still going to test their rockets here, and that we can't allow them to test rockets anymore here. Well, my concern is maybe they're not tests. 2 anti-ship cruise missiles, 2 approaching carriers. I can't imagine Kim Jong-un being that insane, but he's been pushed into a corner by the U.S. policy. Now, China may be rethinking their approach to North Korea. They may realize that helping the U.S., grab North Korea only moves closer the day that the U.S. will go after China and that yuan itself. So we're starting to get some waffling over there. Meanwhile, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is holding talks with the North Korean Foreign Minister Ri Yong-ho. And apparently, Russia's trying to come on in and say, we need to tamp this down. Every time Kim Jong-un opens his mouth, he's giving the United States an excuse for the invasion, which we have been hearing the United States wants to do anyway. And again, look at the pattern over there in Syria. Oh, Assad is evil, we have to invade. And then that lie fell apart. Oh, well, we're going into Syria for the chemical weapons. And then Assad gives his chemical weapons away. And the U.S. comes back and says, well, we have to go into Syria anyway for ISIS and Al-Qaeda. The goal is more grabbing of other people's resources by the United States. And all this talk about nuclear weapons and sarin gas and all the rest of it, it's just the excuse. No matter what you do to please the U.S., give up your chemical weapons, give up your rockets, give up your nukes, the U.S. is still coming after you. Iran, good example, signed the P5+1, suspended all their nuclear activity not connected to the peaceful uses of nuclear power, their power station, and still we're hearing the United States wants to invade Iran in October. It's pure aggression. It's land grab. It's wealth grab. And all this talk about, oh, we're concerned about the threat to the world of Iran's nuclear weapons. It's just the sales pitch, and this is just more of the same. All righty, we're going to take a phone call. Ken in Fort Worth, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy, howdy. Hey, Google KOCH Summit. And then the Koch brothers are having some kind of summit in Richmond, Virginia on the 19th of August, and Vice President Pence is supposed to be there.
Ooh,
and maybe
boy.
you can Google it and you can study it and see what's going on.
Yeah, I'm very troubled by Pence's visibility, and it does seem like the deep state, the narcocracy, wants to set an example. You know, you foolish American voters, you will never be allowed to vote for the people you actually want. We'll just run you through that dance every 2 years so you feel like you're involved.
And we go to Dallas at Americans for Prosperity, and the Concerned Veterans for America go there, and we make phone calls on phone banking. But they're connected some way to Koch brothers. They pay for it or whatever it is. But anyway, it's supposed to be on the 19th of August, and who knows what's going to be about. Just let you know, you can hunt around stupid.
Yeah, I'll look around for that. It's a very unstable time right now. And,
hey, I'm gone.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. I mean, they're flinging wars in all directions. They're attacking each other. It does feel like the United States government is coming apart, which is what I have been predicting for quite some time, but it is still not at all pleasant to be watching. And again, living here in Hawaii, we are going to be a target. I'm not concerned about North Korea so much, but if this swells to include Russia and China, then yeah, we're a target. There's no two ways about it. And the local government is out there trying to reassure us that they're putting together a program for the civil defense of all Hawaiians. We don't have any bomb shelters here, except for the one for the government that's tunneled into the H3. So maybe they're stockpiling potassium iodate pills. Yes, you've been nuked. Everything you have is lost. Take 2 pills. Everything will be fine. All right, let's get on back to our domestic politics right now. Remember that, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they're trying to distract from this because all of a sudden the Clinton Lynch story is getting traction. People are talking about it, even on the corporate media. It's come on out now that the meeting between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch at that airport was not just an accident where they just happened to be going through the same airport. Apparently, the FBI leaked the classified flight plan of Loretta Lynch to Bill Clinton in order that he could basically know where she was going to be and have this meeting. So, again, that's where the deal was being made here. Story coming out of Blacklisted News. Documents prove the Department of Justice and media were in a panic mode after Loretta Lynch's secret meeting with Bill Clinton went public. Say they love all this stuff to be totally secret. When it goes public, that's when they hit the panic button. And this is coming out of Town Hall and basically just saying that everybody was in a panic because it did look so incredibly bad in the middle of a supposed Department of Justice investigation into Hillary Clinton's email server. Now, apparently, after she got back from that meeting with Bill Clinton, Loretta Lynch was sending a lot of her official mail using a fake name, Elizabeth Carlisle, which I think was her mother's name. And she was communicating about press talking points, and she didn't want to leave a record that was in her name. But as it turns out, there are other identifying marks on email. There's the headers, which you don't normally see unless you go in and turn on the option in your mail client. There's a lot more to email than, hello, how are you, blah, 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 talk to you soon. Another story coming out of 12160. Emails are showing that the Washington Post and the New York Times were very reluctant to cover that Clinton-Lynch secret meeting at the airport. We have to protect the narcocracy. Over at Periscope TV, Jay Sukolo is saying that this scandal, the Lynch-Clinton meeting and Hillary's subsequent release, has definite links to the Obama White House. It all ties back to that narcocracy. Forget about Republican and Democrat. The way Washington, D.C. is really structured is those on the inside of the narcocracy and the troublemakers on the outside. Now, getting on back to Seth Rich, private investigator Rod Wheeler has been in communication with Fox News reporter Malia Zimmerman, and basically saying that Donna Brazile is on that list of persons of interest relative to the death of Seth Rich. And they're trying to shout that one down as well. Do you remember, I mentioned it only a couple of weeks ago, when Monica Lewinsky was testifying about how her blue dress got stained before Congress, and she walked on out expecting a phalanx of media and saw an empty staircase, because while she was talking about this, Bill Clinton went and started flinging cruise missiles all over the place. And maybe this sudden rush to get the war in North Korea going, along with the objective of going into North Korea, maybe they've moved it up. They were talking September 1st. Maybe they want it to happen now, because too many Americans are talking about all these dead bodies, about how there is no proof that Russia had anything at all to do with the DNC emails or anything to do at all with the results of last year's election. They have been flogging that dead horse for months now, and it's not getting any traction. Well, we have to stop them thinking about it. Let's start a war over here and, change the story. It's one of the reasons I love that movie Wag the Dog. They talk about, how it works in the real world. The Marine barracks get bombed. 24 hours later, the U.S. invades Grenada. Change the focus, change the story. They might actually be getting ready to invade North Korea or attack North Korea to distract Americans from all these other scandals that they can't stop from surfacing anymore. Now, over at stateofthenation2012.com, they're asking a very relevant question. Is Attorney General Sessions working for the Bush family? Now, they put in the word unwittingly. I don't think that's accurate. When you look at how many months Jeff Sessions has had that job without moving on all those Title 18 violations of Hillary Clinton, you know something is wrong. Sessions is out there making war on legalized marijuana, and he's making war on leakers. But the former director of the FBI went on down this laundry list of felony Title 18 violations and said, we're not going to prosecute. And then Trump won, and the voters, even in West Virginia, just last week where Trump put in an appearance, they're still shouting, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. It's time. It's overdue. If Sessions won't do it, get a new AG in there. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, as you know, the Clinton Foundation took in a lot of money from foreign governments, and there are questions whether the Clinton Foundation was really a legal nonprofit. But foreign governments seem reluctant to complain. And that basically tells us that both ends of that cash pipeline have something to hide. And apparently, according to Sputnik, many of the donors to the Clinton Charitable Foundation knew they were not contributing to charity. They were there for some other reason. Pay for play, the Uranium One deal, good bargains on Haitian real estate for resort development. It's a big, ugly sore out there, and everybody's trying to pretend that it doesn't happen there. Oh, don't look at the Clinton Foundation. We've got a war for you over here. Look at the war. The war is fun. Anyway, the Russia-Trump investigation is apparently not really getting anywhere. They're trying to basically track down this former British intelligence officer who wrote that discredited dossier on Donald Trump, that he and a couple of prostitutes did something really icky in the Moscow hotel. And now they want to talk to him, and they're not able to really find him. Apparently, he was tracked down at his lawyer's offices. But the committee's leading Democrat, Adam Schiff, said that neither he nor his Republican counterpart had been informed that he'd been located. So, now getting on back to Mueller and his hatchet squad. And we know it's not an objective, unbiased investigation when you look how Mueller is good friends with Hillary Clinton and the lawyers he has hired on his staff. They're all heavy donors to the Democratic Party. But apparently, they're not finding anything. Even though they have broadened the investigation, they haven't really found anything out there. And apparently, some of the lawyers working for Mueller are now taking out special insurance policies in order to protect themselves against counters lawsuits for defamation or harassment. And that is a very, very telling indicator as to what's going on there. Now, let's talk about Obamacare, which Congress, the Senate, failed to repeal on just one vote from John McCain. Obamacare has become a major problem on the economy. Right now, Obamacare insurance premiums account for 60% of consumer spending. And that's why people don't have money to go into the shopping mall. See, all of these corporate executives and these politicians, they're all thinking about ways they can grab more of the money. And where it is all falling apart is there's only a finite amount of money still out here in the hinterland. When the government raises the rates on our health insurance, families have to stop buying something else. They stop buying this year's clothing for the kids. They forego a new car. The amount of money in circulation remains constant. The amount of revenue activity remains constant. The amount of resulting tax revenues remains constant. You cannot take money out of the economy until you start putting it back in. So apparently the GOP is now facing their own class action lawsuit. Apparently, this retired attorney in Virginia Beach, Bob Hegman, has filed a lawsuit in U.S. District Court saying the fact that the Obamacare has not been repealed is a failure of the Republican Party, and is accusing them of basically being a racketeering, guilty of fraud and racketeering. And he's basically going to sue them. The lawsuit lists the entire Republican National Committee and Virginia's two national GOP committee members as co-defendants in the lawsuit on behalf of all GOP donors. So we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And the corporate media is still pounding on this story that North Korea already has a nuclear warhead small enough to put on a missile. And this reeks of Saddam's nuclear weapons propaganda to me. It was only a couple of weeks ago the Russian Foreign Ministry said North Korea is years away from being able to miniaturize a warhead. And if you go back and you look at the early development of nuclear weapons by the United States, yes, getting from Project Trinity to a bomb that could be dropped from an airplane was a rush job. But it was a lot of years before they were able to get their warheads down to a size small enough to put on an ICBM. The Soviets couldn't even do it. They went the other way. They built much larger rockets, which actually gave them an advantage in the early days of the space race. It's not that easy to do. Remember when they were screaming about how Iran was hiding uranium centrifuges in the rose bushes? And they were counting on ordinary Americans not understanding how difficult it is to go from 5% enrichment, which is what you have for nuclear power station fuel rods, to the 92, 95, 96% enrichment that you need for a nuclear weapon. It's not like it's a blender on the desk and you go from chop to puree. It's a little more complicated than that. All right, and getting on back to the politics here. Apparently, Kellyanne Conway is getting ready to make comments about North Korea and all this other stuff. Hillary Clinton is back. She has risen from the dead. And she's started a new grassroots PAC called Onward Together. Actually, she started it earlier this year with former Governor Howard Dean. And their stated goal is to support a coalition of Democratic groups led by activists and organizers. And Hillary has now hired two of her political operatives from her 2016 presidential campaign to help run this, to help manage this. So, no signs of retirement from Hillary. And I have a message to Donald Trump, or to whoever's monitoring this show on his behalf. If you do not get your Attorney General to charge and convict Hillary Clinton on just one felony, she will be back trying for your job. And they will double up on the number of illegal immigrants that they're having vote for her and all the other skullduggery they have to try and steal the election, of which Judicial Watch, if not your own Election Integrity Commission, is discovering huge amounts of evidence. Look at that story that came out of California. They had 144, they had almost 1.5 times as many votes as registered voters. Let me rephrase that. They had 1.5 times as many registered voters as people actually living in those districts. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Jim in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. I have a quick question. Do you think those idiots in Washington, D.C., they want to start a war because they know that the stock market and the economy is about to crash, and they're hoping that by starting a war, it might sort of make the economy a little better?
Well, maybe not make the economy better because we don't have the infrastructure to do that, but certainly to use as a distraction. And they've done it before. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008. And here we are. Look how many countries the United States has invaded, drone struck, regime changed. And yeah, that's a big part of it. If it doesn't make the economy any better, what the powers that be are convinced is going to happen, if they can get a really major global war kicked off, the American people are going to forget all about the crimes and the corruption and all this other, the abuses of TSA and the violations of the Bill of Rights, and will salute the flag and happily fling what's left of our money and our babies onto the designated enemy's bayonets because, hey, that's what happened the last 2 times. I don't know that it will work this time. I am still looking at a Soviet Union-style collapse for the federal government. And all of this military activity around the world is the U.S. version of the Soviet incursion into Afghanistan, just grinding on and grinding on and grinding on and not getting anywhere until finally the Soviet Union just had to quit.
I would agree with that. But go back to 1999 when the country was in a recession, then all of a sudden 9/11 happened. And even though it did boost the economy a little bit, it eventually collapsed due to the stock market and the housing market.
Yes.
So, all right, Michael, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Jim. We're going to let you go. And again, an important lesson from history is when you look at a history-making event like an assassination or a war, they never happen for just one reason. That is what is put out in the corporate media and in the history books to try and make you think you understand what's going on. But the reality is that there are all these different groups and individuals who all have their own particular agenda, and they come together because their particular agenda is best served by assassinating John F. Kennedy or launching a war into wherever. And that's how these things come on about. Everybody involved has their own differing reason for being there, but they're still all involved here. All right, let's get into the war zones. There are so many of them right now. Apparently, ISIS all of a sudden is deploying large reinforcements. Gee, I wonder where they got all those weapons and supplies. And they attempted a retake of Sukhna, but apparently they were not able to succeed. The Syrian army basically put them backed by Russian air assets. Now, up in Afghanistan, all of a sudden, they're trying to resell going back in there. It was only a few days ago they were saying, oh, it's just time to get out of Afghanistan. Just like earlier in the year, they're saying, oh, it's time to get out of Syria. And then all of a sudden, something happens and the war is on again. Oh, ISIS and oh, he's gassing his people at Idlib. In the case of Afghanistan, the excuse they've come up with now is that ISIS is all of a sudden in Afghanistan. They're helping the Taliban. Ooh, bad Taliban, bad Taliban. And so we're looking, the violence is coming back to these poor people in Afghanistan. Story out of Russia Today, where these Afghan refugees are saying that ISIS attacked them, and then the United States Air Force bombed their village. They're getting it from both sides. It's amazing. Now, down in Syria, the U.S.-backed Kurds have released a video showing the destruction of a Turkish tank inside Syria's territory. Now, all of a sudden, Turkey is becoming a real loose cannon on deck. Nobody's really sure where Turkey's going to be going or pivoting in the near future. We're going to take a phone call. Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, I'm starting to think that Trump is also protecting Hillary Clinton. I mean, it's real easy to say my attorney general doesn't want to do anything about anything and this and that, but that was probably already planned that way. I mean, I don't see the establishment giving up any of their authority. And when you think about it, it's a prime opportunity for us to bring the Democratic Party and probably the whole government down.
It does.
Why aren't we doing it?
Well, for a couple of practical reasons here. Okay, and this is why I am opposed to a civil war or an armed rebellion. If there is one thing this government is really good at, it's killing people. And they don't hesitate to kill their own. Look what they did out at Waco, Texas. Okay, but we're seeing a government that is tearing itself apart right now and trying to mask that with all these wars of aggression. And like I said, these wars are maybe turn out to be the U.S. version of the Soviets' mistake in Afghanistan. Because we're not really winning these wars. We're stuck in all these quagmires all over, and it's grinding up men, money, munitions, supplies. It's turned into a war of attrition, and our nation is not wealthy enough to prevail in that.
Yeah, I just don't understand why Trump wouldn't, while he's making his tweets about Sessions going after Clinton, he should say that we need to research Seth Rich's murder in the DNC servers, and it needs to be said every single day.
Well,
and the Awan brothers.
Yeah, at this point, it looks to me like the deep state, the narcocracy, have successfully corralled Donald Trump. Yeah, they'll let him out to go on out and fly on Air Force One and have a rally and everything. But it looks like the authority of the president is being usurped away from him Congress is usurping his authority with their veto-proof majority on the sanctions. Apparently, the Pentagon, the top commanders of the Pentagon are out there saying that unless they agree with orders coming from the commander-in-chief, that they may not go along with them. And so it's a complete breakdown of the chain of command, which is a really lousy thing to have happening at the point where you're getting ready to kick off a couple of shooting wars.
Yeah, and I don't know. The crimes are stacked so high. It's just unbelievable that that's not the focus. That should be the focus. And is the Congress going to go to recess pretty soon, or are they already at recess?
They're already at recess, but they've the Senate's pulled a little fast one. They're having somebody come on in and gavel a session open every day, say there's no quorum because nobody shows up, and then gavel it closed. So that technically the Senate is not in recess, and that blocks President Trump from firing Attorney General Sessions and going with a recess appointment.
He may still have to fire Sessions. I mean, I hate to say that.
But then he'll have to replace Sessions with somebody that is approved and confirmed by the Congress, and the Congress are as up to their neck in the narcocracy as anybody else. Okay.
I see it as it's an opportune time to bring down the corruption, and we're not. They're not allowing us to do it, but we have to come up with a way to do it.
My advice is sit back, have some, club soda, some popcorn, and watch the show. It's only a matter of time before it starts tearing itself apart. Look how fast it happened in the Soviet Union. Or if you want another example, look how fast it happened in Romania. I mean, it was 2 weeks. And at the start of the 2 weeks, everything looked like it was just fine. And 2 weeks later, Ceausescu was machine gunned to death on Romanian national television. Could happen that fast here.
Now, just because we have a collapse of our government, I mean, how are we going to make sure that the same people that are in charge right now are not going to regain power? That
is a very good question, and that's why I've been saying that we should be planning now for what kind of a nation and government we're going to have in this country when the present one finishes its death rattle. Because, there'll be no end of carpetbaggers coming on in saying, I got a brand new government for you, I got a brand new private central bank, just sign your name here on the dotted line, and all will be hunky-dory. And we know that that's going to be a fraud. The slavers are going to move as quick as they can to re-enslave us. And we have to be ready to basically, give them a pop in the nose and say, no, we've had enough of that, thank you, go away.
Yeah, because like during the first Great Depression, I mean, it was the power people that had money that knew how to game the system to control power again. Was it not, or am I mistaken?
Well, during the Depression of the 1930s, the government never actually fell. Okay? We're dealing with a whole new paradigm here of the federal government collapsing. And I would make a prediction here right now, certainly based on what I'm hearing locally, is that if the federal government collapses, probably most of the state governments are immediately going to reassert their original sovereignty under the Constitution. And that right there is going to be the biggest roadblock to the reestablishment of essential tyrannical, abusive government, which was never in the blueprints for this country.
Yeah. I just want to reiterate, it's our opportune time to bring them down.
We're going to have to agree to this, Alex, we're going to have to agree to disagree. I absolutely am not going to support the idea of an attempted armed insurrection or a civil war. It would be very foolish.
I'm not talking
All right,
violent.
what is your plan? How are you going to bring them down?
Well, we have to if we could get live video hearings in real time of the crimes and the hearings, if the American people could watch that like they did the O.J. Simpson trials, they're done.
Yeah, but the government controls the hearings. Who talks, when it's private, when it's public. Okay, I mean, we'd all like to see this stuff out there, and we're digging at it and trying to make it public. against a government that wants to control everything that we know, everything that we see, everything that we hear. And that really is where the Civil War is taking place, thankfully, in cyberspace, because nobody gets shot that way. But the thing is, you're sitting there acting like there are still elements of our federal government who are actually going to do their job. And I think Loretta Lynch and James Comey made it very obvious, and even Jeff Sessions. No, they're not there to do their job. They're there to protect the narcocracy.
What a shame. That is just...
I agree with you. I agree with you. And I look at this, and I keep going back to that wonderful monologue in the premiere episode of The Newsroom on HBO, where Will McAvoy's up there saying, we're not the greatest nation on earth anymore. We used to be. What happened? Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we got taken over by a bunch of drug lords and money junkies, and as a result, our standard of living is just like you find in any other country whose government has succumbed to drug corruption. Okay?
Yeah. And war corruption.
And war corruption.
It expands all the way. Healthcare corruption, war corruption, money corruption. It's all from the same protocol. Here it is. Open doors everywhere. Go do whatever you can do to make money and to make us money. And that's what it is.
That's it. We've lost our sense of balance. And again, I don't have an opposition to making money. I wouldn't mind being kind of rich. I don't need to be mega rich. I don't need to be billionaire, but I'd like to be comfortable and secure and get Claire a new recording studio built, not to mention a new car here. But the problem is there has to be a balance in society. Yes, making money, but also your quality work, reputation. And we've lost that. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call, Alex. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, over in Iraq, and yes, we're still thrashing about over there. Apparently, the U.S. Air Force carried out an airstrike on an Iraqi militia unit, which belongs to Iraq's popular mobilization units in Anbar province, close to Iraq's border with Syria. And apparently 35 people were killed and 25 were injured. There's also a report that all of a sudden there seems to be an increasing number of assassinations of medical doctors in Iraq. What a mess they have made. Corporate media is still going on. North Korea will be met with fire, fury, and power if they continue their threats. That sounds like a threat to me, right there. It's American exceptionalism. We're allowed to threaten and bully and bluster, not you. You're not. We're allowed to have nukes. We're allowed to nuke other countries, not you, because we're exceptional. We're the United States. Now, story coming out of Sputnik News, declaring it a significant accomplishment, the United States has started to build a major naval facility in Ukraine. And I could imagine that if Russia started building a naval facility in Cuba, it would not be called a significant accomplishment, but a serious provocation. Harumph, harumph, harumph. All right, let's grab a phone call from Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha, nui nui.
There you go. No snack bar? Shame on you.
Okay.
Bad joke, bad joke. Anyway, had to throw that in there. When you mentioned about the aspect of allowing things to collapse as far as the government goes, so that way things can be restructured and keep the bankers out of the picture and all that kind of good stuff, I imagine you recall at one point during a Senate hearing regarding a military head back in the 80s or 90s, I don't remember exactly which administration it was, by the name of Ollie North.
Yes.
When he was questioned about, and then it got redirected because they did not want to even go near the commentary or questioning, about what he knew about was called COG, or continuity of government. And yet it was very quickly, the questioning changed to another person on the Senate board to avoid that questioning.
Well, actually, what they were trying to keep the lid on with Oliver North was the drug smuggling that was going along in parallel with the gun running. I mean, the reason it was all a scandal when Eugene Hassenfuss's plane went down and it blew the whole thing wide open. It was a violation of the Boland Amendment for the U.S. to be supplying arms to the Contras in Nicaragua. And so that was the big scandal, and they dragged in Gorbanifar and Iran and all this other dealing. But the one thing they had to hide from the American people was that drug smuggling that was going on in parallel. And, of course, it's since come on out with Terry Reid has a book about the drug smuggling that was going on, the Crimes of Mina article. And pretty much it's an open secret at this point. Francis, got to let you go. Got to do station identification, and we'll be right back with another phone call. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go right back to the phones here with Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, I think this is great news that they miniaturized the nuke, because that didn't just happen, the other day. If they did miniaturize it, it probably happened a while ago. And they're a nuclear power now, which means they're not going to be attacked now. I think that's great news.
Oh, come on. I mean, when the U.S. was out there saying Saddam had nuclear and chemical weapons, and it was a lie, and they attacked, and if there was ever a time Saddam would have actually used chemical and nuclear weapons, it was then, and he didn't. And that was what proved it was a lie. And this is just more of the same thing. Yeah, they're getting ready to attack North Korea. They're trying to sell it to the American people with this boogeyman of nuclear war. But if North Korea really did have nuclear warheads on those missiles, the U.S. would be backing off right now. Look at the track record over the last 16, 20 years. The United States only beats up on nations that do not have a nuclear deterrent.
Yeah, but don't forget, North Korea did something that Saddam Hussein didn't do. They tested a couple explosions underneath the ground.
Yeah, but again, that doesn't mean they've got a deployable weapon. And again, even if they did, they're not just going to haul off and use it. The whole point of having a nuclear-tipped missile is to basically send a message to other countries, leave us alone. Don't invade us, don't attack us, don't bomb us, and everything's going to be fine. Let's sell products back and forth, okay?
Hey, Mike, I think that, basically you're right. Basically they have a right to have it. Hey, Mike, I'm talking about North Korea. Remember not too long ago, wasn't the Russians making a deal with them to run the gas pipeline to North Korea?
Yeah, they were, and at the moment that may be halted by the sanctions, and China at least nominally appears to be going along with that, even though it's going to cause them a great deal of financial harm. Of course, a trade war with the United States of America would cause even more harm than that. So China appears to be going right now with the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, because they can sell their coal and then get cheap natural gas. That would help their economy out a lot more,
Yeah, it definitely would. Yeah, it definitely would. But what is really alarming, I think, to most people around the world is the incredible recklessness of U.S. foreign policy that seems oblivious to the ancillary harm that they're causing around them. It's like a small child, just running through a china shop, banging into the display cases and unconcerned with all the falling plates and glasses and dishes in their wake.
You know what's amazing? How we use the UN when it's to our advantage,
yes.
And then other times we don't want them here.
Yes.
What a fraud. It's like, remember, we went there. North Korea didn't come here. We went to Vietnam, Iraq, Libya, Syria, Afghanistan, the coup in Ukraine. They didn't come here. So I want people to remember that. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the phone call. It's very obvious to anybody who's looking at this objectively who the aggressor nation is at this point. And it is the United States of America. And I know that's not comfortable, and you don't want to have to look at that, but that's just the way it is. It's the way our government is behaving. Now, Russia is making preparations for the United States to pull out from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty, which the U.S. has already announced they're about to do. And as it turns out, the U.S. did not, in fact, destroy all their intermediate range nuclear missiles. They turned them into target drones. But those missiles are still there and very quickly be turned back into nuclear-tipped rockets. And so Russia is saying, we're going to have to deal with this. Now, China is building its first domestically produced aircraft carrier. They're calling it the Type 001A. And apparently, Chinese manufacturing, ship fitting is so efficient, they're saying that this carrier is going to be ready to join the Chinese Navy ahead of schedule and is likely to be deployed to those South China Seas and those islands down there. Now, China, in their recent 90th anniversary celebration, they had a big parade, and China unveiled all kinds of new weapons, including stealth fighters and new ICBMs. So they're becoming formidable. The unipolar world under the United States is now gone. It's back to a multipolar world. And Russia and China are building all these brand new weapons. And the U.S. defense industries are producing junk. Now, China is signaling it's ready for a battle off the Korean Peninsula. And the interesting part is they're saying we're sending a signal, and it's not just targeted at North Korea. And that is a very significant statement. And what they may be talking about, China has announced they're preparing a small military operation to expel the Indian troops from that region in the Himalayas where they're trying to build a road. And they went across the border here. Now, we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to go back to the phones. James in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. How you doing?
Doing fine.
I have some analysis here, and you tell me how I did. During the 50s and 60s, they wouldn't be able to have. I know they were spying on the American people, but they wouldn't be. They wouldn't be able to have.
They who?
I mean, the U.S. government was spying still on the people, but they weren't. The government didn't have it so out there like they say. Yeah, we are like they have it now with the NSA, and they tell us, and they weren't able to have it back then because didn't the Soviet Union have something like that, like the Cheka, right? It had like a neighbor on every corner, some telling.
The East German Stasi did, the Soviet Union did, Nazi Germany certainly did, but back in the 1950s and 1960s, this was being hidden from the American people. That's why when the COINTELPRO scandal broke, it was such a shock, and Congress had to have hearings about it because it literally made the government appear to be illegitimate in the eyes of the American people. And in point of fact, it did. This was the FBI, was not engaged in crime fighting or fighting terrorism. It was the FBI itself committing crimes in order to deprive American citizens of their First Amendment right to dissent. And they did all these dirty tricks like the Black Panther coloring book. They set up this riot at Disneyland to discredit the anti-war movement. And it was all this nonstop dirty tricks. They destroyed the career of actress Jean Seberg because she was saying things the White House did not like. And so, yeah, they've been doing this kind of stuff all along. But Americans are just now realizing, yeah, this is the true face of the federal government.
And back then, they had to hide it because if they would have told the people, it would have gone against everything that they were supposedly fighting against with the USSR, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time the U.S. government sends kids off to war, it's, we're fighting for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights in the American way. And then these kids go on out and they get killed and crippled, and those that come back in the wheelchairs all of a sudden realize that this country hasn't been following the American way for a very, very long time.
Because I just watched the news report in Mosul, and then, I don't know if you heard, like, they're just suspecting anybody ISIS. And it's almost like, that's what's going on today worldwide, like the George W. Bush doctrine. you're either with us or you're with the terrorists. And it seems that even if you just watch a video, I don't know if you saw the report of they had it over Fox News. Some guy watched rehabilitating ISIS fighters, but he watched the video, and yeah, he's probably an ISIS fighter. But they're saying if you just watch to learn about it, you can be considered that. And that's, I mean, how did we come from that point? Like,
well, it's guilt by association. It's guilt by association, and the idea. I mean, they're already out there trying to say that just by looking at Russia Today, you are a tool of Russian propaganda. And of course, the Washington Post had to back off of that. But I mean, that's where we're going. It's a return to McCarthyism, guilt by association. If you're standing next to a commie, even if you don't know they're a commie, well, then you're a commie too, and you deserve to have your career taken away from you. And
but they don't. But they don't care about the military technology being stolen from us, and they make us worry about stupid things like leaks would be national security or wasted food stamp money. But when they don't tell us that you have much bigger things that will make those things look like not even a problem if you look at the bigger thing, the bigger way.
Well, that's what the corporate media's job is to direct your attention. Look over here, look over there. Professional magicians call it misdirection. That's the reason we have things that throw off smoke and flame and flashes of light. It's called misdirection, and that's a big part of what the corporate media is doing. They don't want you looking at the emerging scandal of Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch's airport meeting. They want you looking at, horrible North Korean monsters are coming for you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then people are thinking that a lot of people believe that there are weapons. I mean, who knows if there are? But it's funny because you know that they are for Palestine. And then all of a sudden, we're going after them real hard.
Yep.
And then to turn another topic, did you know? And I'm gonna go. Did you know that Chicago is the largest Palestinian population in America?
I was unaware of that, but let's go on back to North Korea here. Yes, there's the issue that Israel does not like North Korea because they're pro-Palestine. There is North Korea's vast mineral wealth, and the fact that it is also a major producer of opium poppies. And the CIA would like to gain control of the opium poppies. U.S. corporations would like access to those mineral resources. There are some rare earths there as well, which would go a long way to breaking the Chinese monopoly on that. Like I said, wars are never started for just one reason. Everybody involved has their own agenda that they're serving. But they all agree, yes, this would be a good thing for all of our various sakes. And that's why they're ramping up this ridiculous war. And again, even if North Korea or Saddam or Iran or any of these countries actually had nuclear weapons of mass destruction and rockets to deliver them with, they are not going to use them. They're throwing away that deterrent that keeps them safe from U.S. aggression. Everybody, including Kim Jong-un, understands he hurls a nuclear missile in any direction, the retaliation will reduce his country to a pool of green glowing glass.
Exactly, Mike, exactly. And we don't need this rush to preemptive strike either. I don't know if they think it's going to be like a shock and awe or something, but that is going to be really, really, the world would change on that day. The world would change.
Well, they put out the latest propaganda, and I imagine they're going to do some overnight polling to see how the American people are responding to this. And, if they're getting a lot of Americans saying, oh, yes, I'm afraid, let's go for it, then the war will be on. On the other hand, if Americans are saying, look, this is more of Saddam's nuke stuff, they might back off, or they might choose to go with a false flag, fire off a nuke somewhere, up in Alaska or out in the ocean off of Hawaii, and say, whoops, Kim Jong-un missed, but all you tourists got a great little selfie with a mushroom cloud in the background, and say, we've been attacked, we have to go.
We got to stay sharp, Mike. We got to stay sharp.
Yes.
We got to stay sharp. We got to see it. Take it easy, okay, Mike?
All right.
Have a good one.
Do my best. It is a little nerve-wracking being here on Oahu. And Claire and I talked to a lot of people. They're very, very concerned. They're not buying this idea that North Korea is to blame for this. We have a very high per capita presence of military. They're clued in. They understand who the aggressor is in this new world war. They're not happy about it either. And now, of course, we're talking about actually being a war zone. We're certainly a first strike target. Not necessarily for North Korea, but certainly for Russia and China, because of all the command, control, and communication that goes through Pearl Harbor. They'll hit that. They'll hit the Diamond Head crater, where there's a bunch of control facilities there, and they'll drop a big one on that bunker that's drilled into the H-3. So I got to buy some really good sunblock here. Now, turning on down to Venezuela, the European Union refuses to recognize the results of the election to the Venezuelan Constituent Assembly. Now, first of all, that's part of the Venezuelan Constitution. So, from where I'm sitting, it really isn't any business of the European Union. And it was that exact same attitude by the United States. We refuse to recognize the Crimean independence referendum, which has brought the European Union closer to all-out war with Russia. It is very arrogant of the EU to make that statement. And I'm sure that a lot of people in Washington, D.C. are saying, what, they're starting to act like they're a power projector like us. We can't have that. The U.S. is preparing more sanctions against Venezuelan officials. Apparently, 20 people with connections to President Maduro. And remember, 2 weeks ago, the head of the CIA admitted this is a U.S. government regime change operation underway. Meanwhile, over in Iran, they've arrested 27 suspected Daesh members. And that is significant because we are coming to understand this pattern by the U.S. government. Oh, ISIS is there. We have a right to fly in and start bombing your infrastructure. They did that with Syria. Now they're getting ready to do it with the Philippines. And obviously, if ISIS can pop up and say, hi, we're ISIS, come and get us, they're going to do the same thing to Iran. And we keep hearing this timetable for Iran is just in October. Apparently, Iran was aided in tracking and identifying these Daesh terrorists, agent provocateurs, whatever name you want to put on them, by the intelligence services of several other nations in the region. So they're all waking up and realizing what the U.S. game is and has been all along. Meanwhile, getting on back to Iran, Iran is responding to this news that Donald Trump is actively looking for a way to be able to walk away from the P5+1 agreement and try and make it look like it's Iran's fault. And again, the IAEA has confirmed once more, Iran is fully in compliance with the P5+1 deal. Now, of course, what the U.S. is out there saying is, well, Iran's missiles, while not formally a part of the P5+1 deal, they're not consistent with the spirit of the deal, and therefore we're going to go to war anyway. Like I said, when the U.S. decides it's going to invade a country, whether it's Iran or Syria or Iraq or whatever, it doesn't matter what that nation does to stop it. Okay, Saddam did not actually have nuclear weapons. Assad gave up his sarin gas. Iran has stopped all nuclear development. It doesn't matter. Iran is on the to-be-invaded U.S. government special high-interest targets list. And all the U.S. government is looking for is a way to sell it to you, the American people. That's all that's missing. We got to sell you this idea that Iran deserves to be destroyed. that Iran is a bad guy, that North Korea is a bad guy, that Iraq was a bad guy, that Libya is a bad guy, that they're all really bad guys all over the place and we're the only good guys left on earth. Tough sell on that one in recent times. But anyway, Iran's Salehi is basically saying that if the U.S. walks out of the P5+1 deal, then all options are on the table. And this guy's the head of their Atomic Energy Organization of Iran. In other words, they're saying if the U.S. drops the P5+1, Iran will in fact start to develop a nuclear weapon. And they'll do it fast before the U.S. can invade. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Getting on back to Iran. The United States is now demanding inspection of all Iran's military sites. The U.S. wants to send inspectors in to basically go over all the military bases and make sure they're not doing something icky. And, of course, Iran is ridiculing the suggestion, saying, you know, how would the U.S. respond if Iran said, we demand complete inspection of all your military bases, such as the ones where the stealth bombers are stored. In fact, Iran basically said it sounds like something a satirist would come up with. Meanwhile, there's been an encounter between an Iranian drone and a U.S. Navy jet over the Gulf. They're claiming that the Navy jet had to swerve to avoid this drone. Well, you know, that little stick and those rudder pedals, that's what they're there for, to move the plane in case you're going to hit something. But Iran is being unsafe and unprofessional. All right, well, if you want to be safe, come on back to our side of the planet. Okay. Now, as you know, the U.S. is playing this ISIS followed by bombs game down in the Philippines. And Duterte understands that U.S. threats of airstrikes against ISIS are actually airstrikes against his country and its infrastructure, because we all saw it happening in Syria. And all of a sudden, Duterte is making a U-turn and is adopting a much softer tone, talking with Tillerson, basically saying, we are friends. There's no reason for you to send in ISIS and then send in the bombers. It may be too late, but at least he's trying to make the overtures. If you go back and remember the run-up to the second war in Iraq, I mean, the first one, Desert Storm, they stopped before they went to Baghdad. The second one, I mean, the U.S. was throwing all these ridiculous demands on Saddam Hussein. We want to inspect your house. We want to look in your bathroom. We want to look under the bed. And toward the end, Saddam said, yeah, okay, whatever. You know, I just want to avoid the war. And in the end, it didn't make a difference, because the objective was the war. And the weapons of mass destruction was just the lie used to sell you the war. Now, Amnesty International has wagged their finger mightily at Israel over their attempt to close Al Jazeera, terming it a brazen attack on media freedom. And we know that Israel is on the warpath against any kind of speech or expression not officially approved by their government. Roger Waters was being interviewed by Radio Sputnik and basically said of this bill in Congress, they're saying they want to tear up the Constitution and sacrifice it on the altar of Zionism. And yes, that's absolutely true. Now, apparently, Israel has been caught out once again supplying weapons and air power secretly to a Libyan warlord. This is just now coming out. It happened a while ago. But apparently, once again, Israel is taking some of those weapons that they get from the United States and they're running them to these other countries. Now, as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu is in serious trouble. His chief of staff and close confidant has turned state's evidence. He knows where the bodies are buried, and Netanyahu's been under investigation for over a year for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust, including his accepting about $1.1 million from accused French fraudster Ahmad Mimran in 2009. Of course, this is small potatoes compared to the Clintons, but still, it's out there. Now, right now, there's a gag order on this case until September 17th. to keep all the information away from those people of Israel who might decide that maybe it's time for a change of leadership. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is out there saying, I won't be toppled. It's my wife who's in trouble. We'll just let her go away and go to jail here. And, of course, to nobody's surprise, Israel is once again claiming that a rocket has been fired from Gaza and hit a patch of dirt in Israel. So get ready for another bombing of those poor Palestinians. We'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And turning to Yemen, it appears that the United States government is sort of adopting a new strategy there. If you want something done right, you got to do it yourself, because they've gone from merely being in the background and supplying weapons and intelligence to Saudi Arabia and the UAE to direct involvement. And we now have troops on the ground in Yemen supported by U.S. bombing missions, all in the name of the strategic alliance with Saudi Arabia. So there's another mess they're getting into. Story coming out of Blacklisted News, and this dovetails with Duterte's sudden reversal diplomatically. Pentagon seeks authority for airstrikes in the Philippines, and as I said before, I think Duterte's change of heart isn't going to be enough, because they're going to bomb the Philippines until it's a safe haven for the global drug traffickers. We know who that is. Poland is still talking about demanding reparations from Germany for World War II war crimes. And they're encouraged, obviously, by the fact that Israel is still getting reparations from Germany and pretty much everybody else, even though the people who committed those war crimes are all dead and gone, pretty much. And the people who were the victims are all pretty much dead and gone. So they're trying to figure out a way to just keep this thing going here. And, of course, this is going to create friction between Israel and Poland, because if Poland starts getting reparations, well, that's less money going to Israel. Imagine Israel's going to say, we trademarked all of this. It's copywritten. It's ours. You can't use that. Okay, apparently following the crash of the Osprey off of Australia, Japan is now asking that these all get grounded, at least within Japan. The Ospreys do have a long history of problems. That idea of the axle that runs all the way across the wing so that one engine on one side can drive both rotors and keep them synchronized, they've had a lot of problems with that. Especially during the early deployments, there were a lot of crashes. And a lot of people are very concerned. They're not really seen as all that safe. And so Japan would rather not have them. Meanwhile, the U.S. Air Force is starting to transition away from the Predator drone more to the Reaper drones, which have a longer range, carry more weapons, faster, deadlier, have better sensors. So it looks like the Predators are going away. Hopefully we'll find them in our local military surplus stores and can have some fun with it. All right, let's see. We're going to take a phone call here from Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, do you actually think that this country is going to be that, but this government is going to be that bold, if you could call that bold, that they're going to just attack the Philippines without permission? Because of so-called ISIS, which is really ISIS, like John B. Wells says. That's incredible. I also don't, I don't know why Russia or China doesn't at this point, especially China, send Chinese. They used to say Chinese volunteers all the time. I remember during the Cold War. Why don't they just send some Chinese volunteers over there and say, no, you're not going to do this. This is our area of the world. No.
Well,
I can't believe they're thinking about doing it.
Well, this is the new model. I mean, the old model of send in agent provocateurs, kick up trouble, bring down the government, put in a new one that you like. The U.S. has been using that since the end of World War II, and now everybody sees it. So they've changed the model. They want to go faster. Send in ISIS, make a lot of noise and fuss, and then the U.S. goes on in and says, we're not making war against your country. Really, we're making war against ISIS, and then they bomb hospitals and schools and things, just like they did in Syria. That's the new model.
Do you think ISIS is going to get the people who are, so-called ISIS? Do you think they're going to get health insurance and retirement benefits from the U.S. government for what they're doing? I mean, this is obvious who they really are. I mean, this is crazy.
Well, it is crazy, and they're mercenaries, and mercenaries don't get things like life insurance policies. And again, looking at Syria, in some parts of the country, the U.S. is now actually going after Al-Qaeda and ISIS because too many of them are starting to blab that, hey, the U.S. has been supporting us all along.
Well, when are people finally going to wake up in this country and understand this is a criminal government? You were saying before about, which the government's going to fold and everything like that. One thing we're going to have to be very careful with is what did happen after the Soviet Union fell. All these vultures came in, well, actually the domestic vultures and vultures coming from this country and other places in the West came and started stealing everything that wasn't nailed down, and even then some, in what used to be the Soviet Union. And it's one of the reasons Putin finally cracked down, and one of the reasons they hate him so much, because he cracked down on these clowns in the first place.
Well, that's why he's so loved in Russia. His approval rating is in the 80s right now. He kicked out the oligarchs, and he took direct control of the central bank, and that's why Russia is back on top of the U.S. government's special high-interest targets list.
It is. What gets me is this guy Browder. This guy Browder is one of is an unbelievable shyster who stole over there, and they finally got him out of there, and now he's going around parading around like he's some kind of a victim or something like that, and he's so afraid that Putin's going to have him rubbed out. I mean, these people are incredible.
Yeah.
I don't. It's almost beyond belief anymore. And we're falling for this stuff in this country. I mean, we're not really. I think people are getting wiser and wiser.
Yeah.
And again, if they're going to start a war, they're going to have to go to a draft. Of course, that's if it doesn't turn nuclear.
That's when opposition to these wars will really crank up. And again, we saw that in Vietnam. While it was, before the draft, we shouldn't be in Vietnam. It's the other side of the world. What the heck are we doing there? When they started the draft, that's when public opposition to the war really kicked on off. And despite the best efforts of the FBI and COINTELPRO to keep the anti-war movement off balance, eventually, there was a 1 million-man march into Washington, D.C., and Lyndon Johnson actually wrote in one of his memoirs that the day he looked out of the White House and saw that the 1 million people down there on the mall was the day he knew that they were not going to be able to prevail in Vietnam.
And it would be worse now. And on top of that, 18-year-olds can vote today. I remember John Kerry at the end of the Vietnam War. I think he was the leader of the Vietnam Veterans Against the War.
Yes.
He said, "Who wants to be the last one to die for a mistake?" Yet he was perfectly willing to start sending troops over to Syria, American troops over to Syria, for that mistake, if you want to call it a mistake. I don't think it's a mistake. I think the government knows exactly what they're doing in these things. And you see, unbelievable hypocrites. In the Vietnam War, I mean, what really ended the Vietnam War, a lot of people don't realize, is that the troops over there, were actually fragging their officers and even NCOs more and more, and they were refusing to go out in the field more and more. And word was getting back, and they were really afraid of an out-and-out rebellion by the troops.
Yes.
And that's one of the main reasons that war finally came to an end, because they did not want to bring that to an end. They put a lot of money into that. They had a lot of equipment over there still. They had a lot of troops over there. The military-industrial complex wanted badly to continue that thing. But that's what I think really ended it. And if they think it's bad now, if that was bad then, what do they think is going to happen now? And that's if we don't get into a war with Russia and the nukes start flying. Let's say we get in a localized war with Iran or something like that. What do they think is going to happen?
Well,
you answer me that?
What's going to happen is what happens in every war. The U.S. government will take more of our money, more of our kids, and the military contractors are going to be making a lot more money, and their stock is going to go on up. And that's why they keep saying war is good for business, but it's only good for the business of death.
Yeah, but these kids are a lot more informed today, thanks to the internet. Okay, where they don't have to count on the mainstream teleprompter.
Yeah, but
reading,
on military bases, around the world, the internet is heavily filtered. Our military rank and file, tremendous amounts of censorship. They don't even get regular radio and TV. They have their own. The military has its own media centers, Armed Forces Radio Network. Remember the movie Good Morning Vietnam with, I'm blanking on his name, Robin Williams.
Probably, yeah. Well, they've had that for years. I mean, that's a known fact. But, even when I was in the military. But the fact of the matter is that I'm talking about the potential, either the potential volunteers in this country or potential draftees. They know what's going on. They're very wise to what's happening. They're not going to be fooled like they did after the false flag in 9/11, when all these kids volunteered to go in because they thought they were being patriotic and they thought they were going to fight people who attacked us. If they really known, they would have probably assaulted Washington, D.C., where the attack really came from, or maybe Tel Aviv and Riyadh, where I also believe the Saudis and the Israelis probably helped.
Yes.
But everybody thought they were being patriotic at that time. People aren't going to buy that this time. Like, I'm telling you.
They're actually, yes, the media said, young people are signing up for the military like crazy. The actual surge in enlistments, there was a surge, but it wasn't really all that big, because even back then, a lot of people were saying, this doesn't feel right. And we have been lied to so many times by this government. And, of course, that was all before Saddam's nukes and Assad's sarin gas. And at this point, I certainly hope the young people of military age are clued in as to just what's really going on, that they live under a government that will gladly throw their lives away for a barrel of oil.
Yeah, but we also didn't know, I didn't even know about the projects for the new American century. I didn't quite understand just how evil these neocons were. I thought there was just another new kind of conservative that were a little bit more militaristic in their attitude. I didn't realize just how evil these people were. And a lot of people didn't. First of all, I barely knew what a mouse was when it came to the internet at the time, with computers and all. A couple of years later, I started becoming, computer literate, but I didn't know. So I didn't know what was going on. I went by the mainstream media myself, and mainstream talk, stuff like that, for the newspapers. But now, I mean, people know, and especially the young people who are glued to the internet, don't even watch mainstream news anymore. What's the average age for Fox News and CNN, MSNBC? Something like close to 70 years old, right?
Yeah, I think so. The non-computer literates are basically the remaining audience for the TV news networks, and the younger people are all online here. But again, those of us who are old enough to have gone through this before, we have an obligation to talk to the kids and say, just sit down for a minute. I want to tell you what's really going on here before you rush on down and sign up for military service here. And I know for a lot of kids, because of the economic reality, it's literally the only choice they have. There is, in effect, a manufactured economic draft already underway in major parts of the country. Do you remember when Hurricane Katrina smashed into New Orleans? And before FEMA got down there, the military recruiters were down there approaching the young people. Well, you lost your home, you lost everything, you've got no money. Here's your way out. Sign up for the military. I mean, just vulture. Just a vulture approach.
And they're not going to get, and certainly not going to get good troops doing it like that. And I know they're now starting to recruit illegal aliens and people from other countries.
Yeah, and they're not going to be committed fighters, and already there are concerns that these unvetted refugees and illegal immigrants actually represent a security threat to the Army itself. Anyway, listen, Mark, I got to let you go. We got another caller waiting on the line. Jason in Boston, thank you for being so patient. What is on your mind today? Jason?
It's been a while. How are you today? So I have something for your listening audience that
I just got from a friend, and I would really like you to look into it and verify it if you haven't already talked about it. It's basically that Media Matters, the group Media Matters,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Has put out a 6-step plan on how to take down the presidency. And I saw the text. I went to the website. I saw the text. It's a very detailed, and each step, so I say 6 steps, has a paragraph, 1 through 6, as to how to, in a very surgical way, destroy this current presidency. 1, have you heard of that? And 2, I'll just leave you with, will you look into it?
Well, I'm going over to their website right now when we're coming up on a commercial break, which is going to give me an opportunity to look and see if it's really there or not. I don't see it just yet, but thank you for the phone call and the heads up. We're going to let you go and switch over to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Mike. Yeah, I think what we got here is just more propaganda. The younger kids that are like, I would say, between 18 and 25, they might believe that North Korea has a intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead that could hit Denver. But they still hate Trump. And, Ivanka's been getting trademarks in China lately on her new fashion line, and I think that would really mess things up if a war breaks out over there. What do you think?
Yeah, that would definitely inconvenience a lot of people in a lot of different ways here. War tends to do that. War is a way of taking commerce between ordinary people and taking all of that money and putting it into the pockets of just a very few war profiteers.
Yeah. Well, we got new wording here. We went from shock and awe now to fury. No, what was it? Fire and fury.
Fire and fury, yeah.
Fire and fury. Well, if there's any kind of casualties, I would say Trump is done. And so I don't think he's going to start a war. He might try to get North Korea to start the war, but that won't happen.
Oh, that's definitely the game plan. Always make it look like it's the other country's fault, or that they deserve it, or that they're evil, or they're undemocratic, or something like that. But after all these countries the U.S. has invaded, drone-struck, regime changed, it's becoming very, very obvious that the only aggressor out there is the United States, and they're continuing that.
Well, those ain't women and children. Those are the Sioux and the Cheyenne Brave waiting for you. So be careful.
Well, again, look what happened during the start of the Korean War, which technically never ended. So this is a restart. It didn't go well. The United States was unable to defeat North Korea back then. I don't think they can do it now. And even people in the Pentagon are saying we're talking hundreds of thousands of casualties. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much, Rick. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Article coming out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently there is a new report out, a very objective one, that's showing that the economy has never really recovered since 2008. It's just one big illusion. And we know that to be true because we know they're lying about the unemployment numbers. Keep saying it's 4 or 5%. We know there's over 90, almost 100 million Americans willing and able to work who have not been able to find a job for months or years. And by the way, that is a higher rate of unemployment, chronic unemployment, than we saw during the Depression of the 1930s. We know that they're gaming the stock market so they can point to it and say, see, the economy's fine. But there really has not been a marked improvement. Go out and look at your city streets. Look at all the retail vacancies. Look at all the homeless and hungry in the streets. And then try and convince yourself that the government is telling you the truth, that there's been an economic recovery. The only place the economy has recovered is Wall Street, and that is because of all the taxpayer dollars poured all over it. Senator Orrin Hatch is out there as they talk about the debt ceiling, and he's literally out there with one of these draconian statements, those opposing more debt don't deserve to be here. In other words, only politicians who are in favor of further enslaving the American people to the Federal Reserve should be allowed in anymore. U.S. credit card debt surpasses financial crisis record. Student auto loan debt hit a new all-time high. The economy is sinking. I can't help but think back to that story yesterday about this woman, mother of two, went through college, is an employee at Facebook, and she's living out of her car because the rents are so high, the student loan payments are so high, the Obamacare costs are so high, there's nothing left over. This is in the United States of America that we are seeing this. Now, German exports have plunged to the lowest level since 2009. And this is the 2.8%, the biggest drop since August of 2015. Most of it, of course, is in the automotive area. People don't have money for German cars, coupled with the recent scandals in which German auto manufacturers were caught in this emissions software rigging scandal. So, now the EU Commission is now making it official. The EU is not going to get involved with the Russian sanctions. They're basically saying, leave us out of it. They danced to the U.S. tune once before, and they suffered for it. So this time, they don't want to have anything to do with it. They're not going to go along. Austria is fearing losing huge projects from these new sanctions. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We're talking about the economy. We're talking about how Europe just doesn't want to have anything to do with U.S. sanctions. And apparently Renault, the French auto giant, has just signed their biggest ever car deal with Iran. It's a joint venture that will see the construction of tens of thousands of cars every single year. So the world is turning away from all this nonsense coming from the U.S. government. They're getting sick and tired of the U.S. throwing its weight around. They've had enough. You go play someplace else. We want to go back to business. Peace through commerce. Make a quality product, people will want to buy it. Don't think you can get by making crappy products or toxic food and then politically arm twist people into buying the products they don't want. And that has become the business model of the United States. Put out cheap products, poorly made, very expensive, and then get treaties to force other countries to buy the products. And if that doesn't work, sell them to the American people. Nobody wants our GMO food. Where are they selling it? Our supermarkets. Are we allowed to label it and know what's in there? No. Vaccines are now mandatory, even though there is a considerable body of evidence they are harmful. We're going to make the product we want to make, and we will force you to buy it. And by the way, that's dictatorship. Getting on back to the economy. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, in the event of a new economic crisis, will need $100 billion, with a B, in bailout money. I think at this point it's pretty obvious you cannot run a national economy on debt. It's never worked out at any time in. Now, the U.S. government is throwing more sanctions on individuals around President Maduro down in Venezuela. But despite a comment last week about embargoing Venezuelan oil, that hasn't really happened for the most part. And according to a report out of Sputnik, Venezuela is still exporting 823,000 barrels of crude oil to the U.S. every year, all of which is bought by privately owned refineries, including 4 Venezuelan-owned refineries in Texas, Louisiana, and other states. The U.S. can't live without that oil, especially with the sanctions on Russia, which is cutting us off from Russia oil and gas. Really didn't think it all the way through. Now, apparently the Germans are in an uproar over the U.S. military's plans to expand a toxic chemical warehouse in southwest Germany. And they are concerned that the materials that are going to be stored there may leak out, based on the fact that the U.S. seems unable to keep such things under wraps. Look at Hanford as one example. So they're very concerned. If these chemicals are toxic, keep them in your own country. Now, apparently, one of the things Jeff Sessions is doing that people approve of is he's moving forward on this immigration agenda. And he's fighting back against these cities that want to be sanctuary cities and are actually suing the U.S. government, saying that the U.S. government does not have a right to withhold federal funds just because the government of the city is defying federal immigration law. I don't think this one is going to go too far unless they can change the venue out to California, where those liberal judges just come up with all kinds of amazingly nonsensical things. But one thing that Sessions said really hit home, and that is that no amount of federal taxpayer dollars will help a city that refuses to help its own residents. And that was aimed right at Rahm Emanuel. Looking at the soaring violent crime rate, yeah, if you've got bad management, if you have bad government, no amount of money on earth will make it better. And I know it's almost a truism in government. If something isn't working, just throw more money at it and it'll start working. But look how that hasn't always worked out. The Obamacare website is one example. Meanwhile, out in California, Dianne Feinstein is demanding we allow in more illegals. We need more illegals for the 2020 election to get Hillary in there. Well, I'll tell you what, Dianne, when you open the gates to your mansion and house the illegals there on your own property, we'll take you seriously. But I'm telling you, they're going to try and steal the White House back. And they're going to do it through massive election fraud. And we know there was a lot of it last year. Judicial Watch is doing a bang-up job exposing it. And here is the issue. Along with these illegals voting for Hillary Clinton, were they also voting for other liberal Democrat candidates for Congress, the state, local level? Were they given an entire laundry list? This is who you're going to vote for? How many people are currently in offices of power because of this out-of-control vote fraud at the hands of the illegal immigrants? This needs to be dealt with. If Trump is going to have any chance at a second term, he's got to deal with this reality. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Over in Europe, things are continuing to get very, very tense. Italy is now demanding the United Nations manage this migrant crisis. Italy has lost patience with the European Union, and that was never going to work because the EU was fully on board with let's just flood our countries in with all these migrants, and yeah, there's a problem with contagious diseases, and yeah, a lot of girls are getting raped, and a lot of violent crime, but it's a small price to pay for the dream of a single global government. And so Italy is now going to the UN and saying it's time to face the reality. This is not working. It is causing immense amount of damage all across Europe, and for that matter, the United States, and it's time to stop the people trafficking. One of the reasons that Italy is being driven to this was an incident where apparently the police were trying to arrest a suspect in Naples, and they were immediately surrounded by a gang of refugees who mobbed them and thwarted the arrest. And a local politician was saying that they're now in a state of urban warfare. The refugees against the indigenous ethnic Europeans. And maybe that was part of the plan because a lot of people have pointed out most of these refugees coming on in are single young men of military age. Very few families, very few old people. Maybe this is what Soros was planning. Meanwhile, up in Turkey, apparently 850,000 Muslim refugees are already on public assistance, financial support from the European Union. And Erdogan is holding them back at the border as a threat against the EU, that if the EU does something Turkey doesn't like, he's just going to open the floodgates and let them go. And so the EU right now is being forced to pay for these 850,000 refugees in Turkey in order that they stay in Turkey. Article coming out of the Express in Great Britain. Why Germans need Britain. And they're out there expressing their fear that this latest economic war between the U.S. and Russia could be a hammer blow to Germany's economy. And if Britain leaves, the entire EU is in trouble. I seriously doubt the EU will still be in existence by the end of the year. It's just ripping apart. The people living in there don't want to be part of the Union anymore. They're sick and tired of the economic predations of the European Central Bank. And they're absolutely horrified at what's happening to their life and their culture from all the refugees. Apparently over in Brussels, somebody, I guess, has lost their temper or they're on prescription antidepressants. Police were basically shooting at this vehicle they were chasing. Apparently the driver claimed there were explosives in the car, and they wound up setting up a police perimeter. So it's like everybody over there is at the breaking point right now. Up in Canada, they have opened Montreal's Olympic Stadium to Haitian refugees fleeing the United States. And apparently thousands of asylum-seeking immigrants are leaving the U.S. because of Donald Trump's election victory and increasing deportation fears, and they're going to Canada. And so many people have crossed the border into Canada, the immigration agencies have had to open the Olympic Stadium in Montreal to temporarily house the refugees. They've turned it into a big campground, and what a mess they're going to make of that, because that's not what it's designed to do. Now, let's get on down to the part about political correctness here. Google is under fire for letting go the author of an internal memo criticizing the company's diversity program. And, of course, this has prompted observers to say that the author's criticisms about liberal intolerance have been proven by Google's very obvious liberal intolerance. Now, James Damore was the author of a 10-page memo titled Google's Ideological Echo Chamber, and was basically interviewed by Bloomberg News. And according to Bloomberg, Damore, who's a software engineer for Google, said he'd been fired for, quote, perpetuating gender stereotypes, end quote. Now, Google did not immediately comment, but their CEO, Sundar Pichai, implied earlier in the day, saying that sending a note to employees, the memo violated our code of conduct and crosses the line by advancing harmful gender stereotypes. Now, Danielle Brown, whom Google recently added as a diversity chief, also condemned the memo, saying the company is unequivocal in our belief that diversity and inclusion are critical to our success. Now, this has actually started a little bit of a firestorm. First of all, the engineer in question is going to sue Google for wrongful termination, violation of his First Amendment rights. Second of all, over at Breitbart, they're launching a new series where apparently the firing of this software engineer has prompted a lot of Google insiders to go public, basically saying that Google is so politically correct right now. It's like diversity is more important than the technology. And looking at some of the poor quality versions of Chrome we've been getting lately. That may be what's going on. Their entire focus, we must be PC, we must be diverse, and we must be all of these liberal ideologies, and somewhere along the way we'll actually get some real work done. Okay, let's take a phone call. Don in Iowa. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. As far as this North Korea, personally, I think there's some hope that we're not going to go to war there. Maybe there might be some kind of thing going on behind the scenes, like Trump is, the art of the deal, he's supposed to be trying to brinkmanship or whatever, or bluffing and stuff. It's part of the deal, right? Bluff?
Yeah, but unfortunately, I don't think Trump is in control. I think his presidency has been successfully hijacked by the deep state, and I think he's been given a choice. You can go along and do as you're told, or we are going to kick you out of the White House.
Damn, Mike, that's a pretty bleak assessment, though, of the situation.
Sorry, you know.
So you really think we're going to, I mean, what's going to happen? There's going to be all kinds of bloods. That'll be the total end of America then, if they attack North Korea.
Yeah.
South Korea is going to, sure, Seoul is going to get screwed up. So that was one of our stalwart allies was South Korea. We'll lose them. Nobody will like us anymore at all.
No, we're on this disastrous path here, and somewhere in the distance is outright war with Russia and China, and we're not going to be able to win that one. Even with all the vast amounts of money we are spending on the machinery of death, we're not going to be able to win against Russia and China in a conventional war, and probably not even in a nuclear war.
Well, I hope there's no war, but as far as North Korea, I don't see why there's no possibility at all that Washington is trying to organize some kind of an internal coup there in the country, North Korea, because it's surely, I mean, there's the people there, his generals and everything. Why can't they just turn against him and say, "Okay, you're gone"?
No, they're fully on board right now. I mean, in fact, they admire him for standing up to the U.S. government. In the Asian cultures, you have to understand the idea of face. It's a very important factor, and anybody who does not take that into account in their calculations is making a grave mistake. Now, the reason they've not been able to do a regime change in North Korea is it is very hard to get in and out of the place, and North Korea has a very excellent security service. All of these arrested Americans who were that they're making a big deal about were quite possibly agent provocateurs who were sent in to try and stir up trouble in order to bring Kim Jong-un down. But so far, it doesn't look like it's going to work. They keep arresting those guys, just like the ones Iran just arrested all those people.
Maybe Dennis Rodman was on a secret mission when he went over there.
Well, Dennis Rodman can't go over there anymore because the State Department has issued a ban on travel of all Americans to North Korea. And they are telling all Americans who are in North Korea right now, get out by the 1st of the month.
Well, I'm hoping for the best. I'm just saying a lot of times there's more than meets the eye in any situation.
I will agree with that. All right, I will agree with that. In many situations, especially in the world of politics and war, there's more than meets the eye. But right now, my read is that the U.S. government, the deep state, is desperate to get a major war going to take the American people's focus off the mishandling of the economy, the crimes, the corruption, the treason, the betrayal, the narcocracy, and try and refocus us over on hating some manufactured enemy out there. And they need to do it before the economic crash, because if the economy plunges and they don't have somebody to blame it on, we, the American people, will blame the government and Wall Street for the disaster. Now then, getting on back to the wonderful world of PC. Apparently down in Charlottesville, Virginia, they have agreed to a reparations fund for black residents, which will be partly funded by selling the statue of Robert E. Lee. Now, I want to make something very clear here, okay? I don't know any black people who've ever been forced to pick cotton, and I have never owned a slave. And it's time to let this nonsense go. And again, my ancestors didn't own slaves. They ran a station on the Underground Railroad helping blacks escape to Canada. Now imagine I go up to Canada and I knock on the door of the descendants of those slaves who were helped by my ancestors and say, you owe me $20 because my ancestors helped your ancestors to get here. They'd laugh me off the porch, and they would be perfectly right to do so. Now, had I been back there at that time, yes, I would have participated in the Underground Railroad, but I wasn't. I wasn't alive then. I can't take credit for things that I am not directly involved in, nor will I accept the guilt for things that happen beyond my control. And we're setting a dangerous precedent right now where every little group with a politically expedient grievance is going to be able to get free stuff by just screaming and yelling loud enough. It's bread and circuses time here in the United States, and it's only getting worse. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I'm getting word that apparently Duterte's change of heart and softer approach has worked. The U.S. is now backing off their plans to bomb the Philippines. Well, at least for the moment. Okay, now then, if you are a fan of drones, you need to understand that people are getting very nervous about them. First of all, they fall out of the sky, they hit things. There have been quite a few instances of people's privacy being invaded by a non-government-owned drone. You can't complain when it's a government drone. They're supposed to invade your privacy. But there's also this idea of flying over territory without permission. And it's gotten to be a real problem. And apparently now the Pentagon has given more than 130 U.S. military bases across the United States permission to simply shoot down any private or commercial drones that endanger aviation safety. If you have a drone and you get too close to an approach path, it will be shot down. I hate to see it happen, but on the other hand, there have been a lot of very irresponsible people with drones. A while back at an event Claire's choir was singing at, there was a guy with one of the really nice drones with the video camera and everything. They're used instead of a crane for TV production. And I got to try that out. It was really cool. I really liked it. All right, getting on back here. Kind of an interesting development regarding gun rights. Apparently, there was this couple, Lonnie and Sandy Phillips. They were parents of a woman who was killed by James Holmes, one of the mass shooters whose brain was melted on prescription antidepressants. And they responded by suing the ammunition supplier known as Lucky Gunner, because the company had sold Holmes the ammunition that was used in the attack. Now, this was a ridiculous lawsuit to begin with. There was no legal basis for it. Lucky Gunner had done nothing illegal. In fact, there was a law passed in 2005, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, specifically saying gun companies cannot be sued for crimes committed with their weapons. But this couple went ahead and sued anyway. The case was thrown out by the courts. Not only was it thrown out, the couple has been ordered to pay Lucky Gunner's $200,000 legal bill, and now they're on the edge of bankruptcy. So think very carefully before you launch a frivolous lawsuit. It can come back to bite you here. Now, getting on over to Planned Parenthood, a lot of people are very upset with these newly issued guidelines about how to address the issue of gender identity with your preschool children. Before they've even reached puberty, they don't even know what's going on. And these people are funded by tax dollars. And apparently the part of the guideline to parents is assume your child may be LGBT. You know, it's unrealistic of you to just, look at the anatomy and say, oh, this is a boy and this is a girl. You shouldn't do that. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't work. It's actually wrong. It's wrong to look at a child anatomically and say, oh, they're a boy or a girl. I remember growing up, that was the definition right there. And in feminism in the 90s, there wasn't supposed to be any other difference anyway, other than that anatomy. But now it's, we're disconnecting you from all that. You don't know. And I'm wondering how many of these little kids are going to grow up with seriously screwed up sense of self here. Because to a little child, the parents are gods. And if the parents are saying, well, you might not really be a boy, you might be a girl, we're not sure. You may be gay, you may be this, and the kid's going to grow up saying, I don't know who I am, which is exactly what the globalist New World Order wants. Workers with no sense of self, no sense of identity, because people with a strong sense of identity are much harder to control. So they're out there with all this nonsense here. And apparently a former Planned Parenthood executive has admitted they have quotas. They have monthly abortion quotas. This was on Tucker Carlson. We'll be right back. Well, apparently Zuckerberg is seriously thinking about running for office, I guess because of Trump. He thinks being a billionaire is the only qualification needed, but he's starting to pull together an exploration committee, and it's already prompted a major backlash on social media. All right, we're going to take a phone call here. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. I hear some static on my line. I don't know what that's all about, so I apologize if you hear it too.
It's the Russians listening to you.
Pardon me?
It's the Russians listening to you.
Oh, the Russians. Okay, well, that's okay. I'm all for it. I'm all for the Russians listening to me. Okay, back in the 90s, I saw a show on the Discovery Channel, and it was about ambiguous genitalia. There's actually a gray area here, and people need to know that we've made this big agenda out of people that have a little of both, and sometimes they just have one set of pipes. And you know, this is how it is, okay?
Yeah, but it's a microscopically small percentage of the overall population.
Well, and it's made a big deal out of. But here's what happened. Doctors way back when used to assign a gender. And so the whole idea of this Discovery Channel revealing was that if a doctor got it wrong and that child grew up and they were the wrong gender because it's determined by hormones, and I'm talking about someone who has, you know, a little of both, and they have to turn one, invert one, or leave it, or whatever they have to do. They're going to choose it when they're babies. If they got it wrong, that child grown up would led a life of pure hell.
Well,
because hormonally,
you're dealing basically with what's a birth defect, and that's not what Planned Parenthood is talking about. Planned Parenthood is talking about how parents with perfectly normal, healthy new children should not say you are a boy or a girl based on their anatomy, but just start them out saying you could be anything we don't know yet, and there's no basis for that.
No, and I kind of question that, and I don't think that happens very much, because what they learned, and the reason the doctor stopped assigning a gender at birth, which is the easiest time to do it, but it left people, a lot of suicides occurred because of this. It was learned that the hormones will determine. So if, now, not everyone's going to be in this gray area with a little of both plumbings, okay?
Yeah, but again, it's a microscopically small percentage of the population, and it really is irrelevant to the larger issue of why Planned Parenthood and indeed others are trying to make us confused about our gender. I'm very comfortable.
That's the agenda. That's the agenda.
That's basically the agenda, to keep us all confused.
That's right.
What restroom were we supposed to use? They're trying to destroy our sense of identity and sense of self so that we're easier to control. Me, I'm 100% comfortable being a guy. Claire is very comfortable being a gal.
Being a girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, but the thing is, some people aren't going to be sure, and it's between them and their doctor, because they need to check the hormones. Because that's still valid. That's still valid. And maybe they do have an intact one or the other. But they still have to check the hormones.
Sherry, you're trying to take a medical oddity And let us be honest, a birth defect.
No, it's not an oddity as much as it's the Catholics look at it this way.
You're looking at apples and oranges.
It's in nature. It's in nature. It's a condition. That's the word I'm looking for. It's a condition, and it does need to be looked at, but not made a big thing out of it with a bathroom bill and all. This is ridiculous.
Okay, hang on, Sherry. The bathroom bills are not being written for people who have this condition that you're describing. The bathroom bills are being written for people who are biologically male, who want to go use the ladies' room and just say, inside, I'm a woman. And it really is ridiculous. And a lot of people are doing this to be fashionable. And like I said, these new guidelines from Planned Parenthood, you have to wonder what is going to happen to a kid who's perfectly comfortable with themselves as they are, not even really aware of the gender issues beyond what bathroom they have to use, because they're preschool, prepubescent, and all of a sudden their parents, who are seen as gods, are saying, well, you might not really be a boy or a girl. You may be something else. And that's going to mess up the kid's head. We had a story. Well, basically it's in the DNA. Your DNA tells you whether you're male or female. And if you
hormone.
Well, where do you think the hormones? Where do you think the hormones are being created?
Okay, DNA then.
The DNA. Thank you. And the idea is, we had a story about a month ago about this liberal mother who just announced ahead of time she just had a baby boy and she was going to raise him as a girl, and he had nothing to say about it. And I think that's a horrible thing to do to a child. Anyway, Sherry.
I will. Okay, thank you.
All right, we're gonna let you go here. We're gonna let you go here. It's apples and oranges here. Now then, over to Nevada. As you know, the Bundys, remember that standoff at the Bundy Ranch? The Bundys have been in federal custody for over 18 months now. And the case is dragging on and dragging on and dragging on, and there's no court date set, and there's no court date set. Now, we're finding out from Nevada Assemblywoman Michelle Fiore that the problem is the FBI does not actually have any evidence of wrongdoing with which they can be prosecuted. And apparently Fiore is getting this from inside sources who are inside the planning for this federal criminal case. And they're just extending and extending. And apparently the FBI are trying to pressure associates of the Bundys to testify against them, to frame them, to build a fraudulent case against them. But they don't really have any evidence. And again, going back to the enclave clause of the Constitution, the Bureau of Land Management didn't have any business coming onto their land in the first place. The government was in the wrong. But during that whole period, we were seeing government land grabs. And remember that Uranium One deal? The land where that uranium ore was the one that was confiscated by the government that led to the standoff at the wildlife refuge. That was all tied in with that. See, if Russia had just come on in and bought up the land, they would have to pay the full price that the landowners wanted, especially the homeowners. So better the BLM comes on in and says, oh, we got to grab this land here, kick all these people out, and then they can make a real discount price to Russia, so that Russia has money left over to donate to the Clinton Foundation, which they did generously. We have a government that is plundering and pillaging our own nation to try and stay afloat. And, of course, make themselves some money along the way here. Getting on back to political correctness, you are not going to believe this one. PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, has now come out with a claim saying that eating cheese is sexist, because only the female cows are producing the milk used to make the cheese. And worse, they're saying that the cows are only producing milk because the farmers are putting them in, and this is their word, rape racks, to have the steers come on in and make them pregnant, and then the calves are sold off for veal. So, I mean, that's how bizarre this whole liberal political correctness is getting. If you eat cheese, you're being sexist against female cows. Now then, getting on to education. story coming out of Blacklisted News. As you know, there are many states where they're trying to outlaw homeschooling. Some states have gone to the point where the parent must actually have a teacher's credential and be retired from the school system in order to homeschool. And students who are homeschooled are finding that even though they meet all the requirements for college admissions and more often than not outperform students coming out of the high schools, there's still a bias in college admissions. We don't want people who can learn on their own or think independently. We want people who've come up through the system and do as they're told. But we'll let you in anyway. Just fill out this loan application and all will be well. Now, Natural News, which is a website I rely on heavily, they, like whatreallyhappened.com, are being targeted with a massive, well-funded, multi-nation distributed denial of service attack to silence the debate on vaccines. This thing's getting very, very intense. And apparently over at Facebook, they started blocking all the Natural News article posts after Natural News posted a link to the White House petition citing dangers of vaccines and calling for Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Vaccine Safety Commission to be given the green light to move forward. And maybe Robert F. Kennedy Jr. actually found something, because it almost seems like there's a knee-jerk reaction to critics of vaccines. Now, down in Australia, the producer of Vaxxed has now been kicked out of Australia. Was down there to tour the movie around the nation, and he didn't announce that he was coming on down there, just came in through the airport, through immigration, got his passport stamped. And apparently this producer, Tommy, had been banned in 2 separate Facebook videos after arriving in New Zealand with the rest of her team. And she's saying her phone had been confiscated by immigration officials who made copies of all of her emails. And she's been kicked out of Australia for 3 years. She will not be allowed back in for 3 years. All because she questions the safety of vaccines. Because there's huge amounts of money in vaccines. And worse, on the day the facade that vaccines are safe finally comes down, there are going to be massive lawsuits not only against the pharmaceutical industries who sold these products knowing they were dangerous, against the medical practitioners who administered these vaccines knowing they were dangerous, but against every single politician and media outlet who covered up the fact that these products are in fact dangerous. And that's why they're pushing so hard, make it all mandatory, and who knows what's in there. We really don't know what is in these needles that they are forcing us to stick into our kids. Remember the big scandals where it came on out that third world countries, the World Health Organization is out there giving free vaccinations. Come on in, get your vaccination. It's against typhus. Yeah, that's it. It's typhus. And then it turns out it was actually sterilizing those women so they could never have children. You don't know what's in that needle. And underneath that white lab coat can beat a very black heart. Now, as you know, there's a growing debate over self-driving cars and whether they work, whether they're ever going to be safe. Now we're hearing about the development of a network that will allow all the self-driving cars to communicate with each other, which is probably going to be an improvement if they write the software correctly. Unfortunately, software development as an art form in the United States is in serious decline. It seems that every new version of a software product has more problems than the one that you were just forced to upgrade from. But setting that issue aside, it turns out the systems by which street signs are being read by the self-driving cars are oversimplistic and they're not resilient. And apparently researchers discovered that it's actually very simple to fool a self-driving car regarding what a street sign says. You can trick them into misidentifying the street signs. And basically, they did 2 different attacks where they went out there and they put tape on the sign, and the self-driving car didn't realize it was tape. Now, I would hope that we're not going to see people go on out and start putting tape marks on signs to fool the self-driving cars. But we do know there is a problem with tagging in neighborhoods where there is gang drug activity going on. That little squiggle there actually represents a turf sign, okay, that only a certain gang is allowed to sell drugs in this neighborhood. And very often they will tag the street signs. And what this article is telling me is that if your self-driving car is going down a street and the street signs have been tagged with gang symbols, the self-driving car may not be able to read them. You and I can, with our visual cortex. We'll look at it and say, well, it's obviously a stop sign. You know, it's been defaced, or that's a speed limit sign. But you still understand what it's saying. The self-driving car's vision system apparently cannot do that, at least not yet. And it needs to be looked into. Now, Washington, D.C. has officially... Oh, we're going to take a phone call. Jerry in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael, and thanks for taking my call. You know, you were talking about education, and some of these homeschoolers, even though they outsmarted everybody else, they weren't getting the fair break in college admission and everything else like that. Here's one better for you. How about a manufacturing business in Indiana that had a homeschooler from, I don't know, 6th, 7th grade, all the way through college, everything else like that. And this guy scored better than everybody else. He deserved the job, and there was a law passed that, you know what, you can't, consider their education because they were homeschooled, even though they blew everybody else away. That is unbelievable. That's about 3 years ago.
Oh, well, it's unfair to those students who went through the formal education system, which has its roots in the Prussian system, which was all about the state educating the child to be of use to the state rather than to the parents or the community. And that's what where public education began. And if you're being homeschooled, then you're not being schooled to be of use to the state. You might actually believe that there was a conspiracy to assassinate President John F. Kennedy. Can't have people like that in the workplace. We'll give all the other slaves bad ideas.
And that's what it's all about, is slavery, Michael. Well, Thanks for taking my call. I appreciate it. Have a great week.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And yeah, that's what the Prussian model of schooling was all about. The government educates the child to be of use to the state, to believe what the state wants the child to believe, to be obedient to whatever the state wants. And all public schooling since then follows that same model. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, last segment of our program today. And as of today, Washington has officially left the Paris Climate Accord. The U.S. State Department notified the United Nations that the United States is withdrawing the country from the Paris Agreement on the reduction of climate change. It's reported on the State Department's own website. And apparently the U.S. Department of Agriculture is now telling their staff to stop using the expression climate change and to replace it with weather extremes. Apparently they want to move away from all this embarrassment of Al Gore and human-caused global warming just falling apart, which it is. And people are already lamenting the fact that Al Gore's movie really has not done very well. And if you put his own money into it, he may be in trouble. So far, it's only made $1 million. That's terrible. That definitely counts as a box office bomb. Now, weather.com is out there saying that normally August would tend to be a very warm and humid month. But in point of fact, we're actually going to start seeing some cooling across the United States. And again, remember back in the 1990s and all these horrific predictions and forecasts, Greenland is going to lose all of its ice. Sea levels will rise, the polar bears will drown, and it didn't happen. Because it's just propaganda to get you to do what somebody wants you to do. North Korea has miniaturized a nuclear warhead. How many times do you have to be lied to by the government and the corporate media until you're ready to stand up and say, I'm mad as heck, and you guys are full of it, and I'm not listening to you anymore? Because we all have to reach that point. We all have to reach that point. Okay. This thing about the acid attacks over in Britain, they're saying it's epidemic, and apparently there's a now case where this schoolgirl attacked her love rival. She had a bottle of acid hidden in a viola case and just splashed it on the girl. What is happening that these so-called civilized nations are acting so uncivilized? It's just, it's amazing. Everything's all about money and status. We're actually becoming very primitive individuals. We're losing our altruism. We're losing our sense of community. In a lot of ways, I think we're already heading into a new dark ages. Okay. Apparently, Uber is losing about $9,000 per car in their leasing unit. They may be looking at layoffs as well here. And apparently up in Portland, an illegal alien released by the sanctuary city Portland goes on to rape a woman. Huzzah, huzzah. Let's hear it for Open Borders. There's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and get something useful done with the rest of the day. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller's program. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please take what you are learning here and go on out and share it with everybody. And if somebody says North Korea has a miniature nuclear warhead, just remind them this is coming from the same people who told us Saddam had nuclear weapons. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.